He challenged time itself, pushed past limits most people see as impossible, and proved that age has never been a barrier when passion runs stronger than any excuse. This isn't just the story of an impressive physique. It's the story of a man who refused to accept the expiration date the world loves to put on dreams. In bodybuilding, where youth is often treated like an absolute rule, Albert Beckles did the exact opposite. While many were thinking about calling it quits, he kept evolving. While others were slowing down, he was getting sharper, more disciplined, and even more dangerous on stage. Here, discipline isn't just a buzzword, it's a way of life. Focus isn't short-term motivation, it's a daily commitment. And legacy isn't built on a single win, but on decades of consistency, tough choices, and an unshakable mindset. How many people do you know who managed to stay at an elite level for that long? As this video unfolds, you'll realize this journey goes far beyond muscles, trophies, or stage poses. This is about perseverance, purpose, and the ability to reinvent yourself at every stage of life, even when everyone around you thinks it's already too late. So get ready to dive into a story that inspires, provokes, and challenges your own beliefs about limits. Albert Beckles' story begins far from the big stages and bright lights of bodybuilding. He was born on July 14, 1930, in Bridgetown, the capital of Barbados, a small Caribbean island where opportunities were scarce, but discipline and hard work were part of everyday life from an early age. His childhood was simple, marked by limited material resources, yet driven by a quiet ambition that already set him apart. While many accepted that reality as their final destination, Albert seemed to see something beyond the horizon. Even at a young age, he understood that life could offer more to those willing to pay the price. At 19 years old, he made a decision that would change everything. He left his homeland and moved to London, England. It wasn't a glamorous move. The early years were brutal, filled with low-paying jobs, long workdays, and an exhausting routine that tested not only his body, but his mind. It was in that harsh environment that he found something that would change his life forever. British gyms became his refuge, a place where effort was rewarded and where he could turn frustration into physical and mental progress. Bodybuilding didn't just appear as a sport, but as a real path upward. Albert's first steps in bodybuilding were built far from comfort. No sponsors, no financial backing, and no shortcuts. He trained with whatever he had. Every dollar earned from simple jobs went straight into basic food, essential supplements, and gym memberships. Nothing was wasted, because everything was part of the plan. In 1959, the first real sign that the sacrifice was paying off arrived. Beckles stepped onto the Mr. Britain stage for the first time, and, even with no competitive experience, finished in second place. His physique immediately caught attention, but it wasn't just that. His stage presence, confidence, and posture made it clear he wasn't there just to show up. But the road was far from easy. As a black immigrant in a time marked by strong social and racial barriers, Beckles faced prejudice both inside and outside the sport. Many doors didn't open easily, and recognition didn't always come at the same pace as his effort. Still, he chose to let his physique do the talking. The following years brought mixed results. Second and third place finishes became common, and fame didn't arrive overnight. For most people, that would have been enough to walk away. For Albert, it was simply part of the process. Every loss was analyzed, every mistake corrected, and every competition became a lesson. Instead of getting frustrated, he adjusted his training, refined his diet, and came back better prepared. Throughout the 1960s, Albert went from being just a persistent prospect to a name that earned growing respect in British and European bodybuilding. His progress wasn't explosive, it was steady, visible with every new competition, every more refined physique, and every more confident stage appearance. While many chased quick results, he was building something stronger. His evolution came from daily repetition, quiet discipline, and a willingness to do the basics better than anyone else. There was no rush, only commitment. And that's what began to set him apart in an increasingly competitive scene. Behind the scenes, his reputation was growing just as fast as it was on stage. Albert was known for his humility, respect for his rivals, and an almost obsessive work ethic. He greeted everyone, observed quietly, kept learning, and never put himself above anyone else. even as his results visibly improved. That attitude pushed his recognition far beyond his physique. Albert became admired not just for his well-built muscles, but for his strong character and professional mindset. In a sport where egos often speak the loudest, he stood out for his calm, confident presence. Little by little, the European scene realized they weren't dealing with a short-term competitor. The year 1970 marked the major turning point in Albert's career. After years of quiet building, constant adjustments, and relentless learning, everything finally started to line up. His victories at the NABA Mr. Britain and Mr. Europe weren't luck or coincidence. They were the direct result of an entire decade of consistency and sacrifice. Those titles elevated Albert to a whole new level. He was no longer just a strong name in the European circuit. He was now seen as a real international threat. The stage no longer felt too big. If anything, it finally felt like the right size for someone who had been preparing for so long. But it was in 1971 that the story changed for good. By winning the overall title at the IFBB Mr. Universe, Albert made history as the first black bodybuilder to achieve that honor. At a time when the sport was still largely dominated by white European athletes, that victory carried a weight far greater than the trophy itself. The impact was immediate and powerful. Albert didn't just win a competition. He broke invisible barriers and opened doors for a new generation of athletes who could now see themselves on that stage. And this didn't happen by accident. Whenever Albert Beckles stepped on stage, one thing became instantly clear. He wasn't there just to show muscles. He was there to perform. His style was elegant, confident, and naturally charismatic, without overdoing it or forcing poses. Every movement felt calculated, yet fluid, as if the stage were a natural extension of him. Unlike many competitors who relied purely on raw power, he understood that bodybuilding is also art. He knew exactly when to hold a pose, how to transition between them, and how to connect with both the audience and the judges. That balance between physical power and artistic presentation put him several steps ahead. His refined posture communicated total control over his body. Open shoulders, a tight midsection, clean lines, and a presence that filled the stage without needing exaggeration. Albert wasn't just competing against other physiques. He was competing against the visual memory of everyone watching. And of course, there were his iconic biceps. Extremely sharp, with impressive peaks, they became an instantly recognizable signature. One simple arm pose was enough for everyone to know exactly who was on stage, even among other legendary names. Over time, Beckles built a timeless visual identity. The 1970s and 1980s became known as the golden era of bodybuilding, a period when the sport reached an almost perfect balance between aesthetics, rivalry, and charisma. And Albert wasn't just present during this legendary phase. He was an active part of it, competing when the level was insanely high. It was in this environment that he shared the stage with some of the greatest names in history. Standing alongside athletes like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lou Ferrigno, and Lee Haney would already be an achievement on its own. But he wasn't there as a background figure. He competed toe-to-toe, with respect and presence. What makes this even more impressive is that these rivalries span generations. While some athletes shined for just a few years, Albert stayed steady, adapting his physique, his strategy, and his presentation to face champions from completely different eras. Very few bodybuilders managed to do that without fading along the way. That kind of competitive longevity revealed something rare. He wasn't relying on youth or short-lived strength. His real weapon was consistency. Year after year, he showed up prepared, conditioned, and competitive, even as the sport itself began to shift in new directions. The golden era produced many unforgettable champions, but very few with a career as long and sustained as Albert's. If there's one part of Albert Beckles' career that truly challenges everything people believed about bodybuilding, it's his longevity. While most athletes start declining in their 30s or 40s, he seemed to move in the opposite direction. He maintained an elite-level physique well into his 50s and even his 60s, something almost unheard of in a sport where youth usually sets the rules. Year after year, he returned to the stage more defined, more balanced, and more competitive. This wasn't just maintenance, it was progress. Albert proved that maturity can also mean excellence, as long as it's backed by discipline, intelligence, and long-term consistency. The most iconic moment of that longevity came in 1985 at the Mr. Olympia. At 55 years old, he shocked the world by finishing in second place, losing only to Lee Haney, who was roughly 25 years younger. The age gap was massive, but on stage, it simply didn't matter. That night changed how the sport viewed aging. Albert didn't just exceed expectations, he completely shattered the myth that physical peak comes with a fixed expiration date. For the first time, many athletes began questioning whether early retirement was really inevitable. More than an impressive result, that moment redefined what was possible. He proved that with consistency, smart adaptation, and respect for your body, it's possible to compete at the highest level far beyond what anyone imagined. When you look at the numbers in Albert Beckles' career, it becomes clear this was something far outside the norm. More than 100 official competitions over several decades doesn't just represent longevity. It reflects a level of dedication that's hard for most people to even comprehend. Very few bodybuilders in history stepped on stage that many times at such a high level. One of the most impressive records is his run at the Mr. Olympia. Beckles competed 13 times at the biggest event in bodybuilding, a mark that stood untouched for many years. And he wasn't there just to make an appearance. In several of those editions, he placed among the top competitors, proving he could still hang with the very best in the world. Among his most notable victories is the Night of Champions, which he won in 1982 at 52 years old, and again in 1985. Winning one of the most respected pro shows on the circuit at that age would already be extraordinary. Albert did it twice, reinforcing the idea that his peak didn't follow conventional rules. He also claimed the IFBB World Professional Championship, further cementing his status among the absolute elite of professional bodybuilding. And perhaps the most surreal achievement came in 1991, when Albert won the Niagara Falls Pro Invitational at 61 years old, beating athletes decades younger than him. Albert's training philosophy was always crystal clear. It's not just about lifting weight. It's about feeling every single rep. He believed deeply in the mind-muscle connection, arguing that real growth begins when the athlete is fully present in every movement, not just counting reps. For him, perfect execution was non-negotiable. Every repetition had to have purpose, full control, and muscular awareness. There was no room for rushed or sloppy movements. Even with moderate weights, he squeezed everything out of the muscle through refined technique and absolute focus. His workouts were known for high volume, lots of sets, and long time under tension. That intense muscle burn wasn't something to avoid. It was a sign the work was being done right. One of the boldest decisions of his career came when he identified his legs as a weak point. Instead of ignoring the issue, he did the exact opposite. He trained legs 4 days in a row, using high volume and intensity. Many people called it crazy or overtraining, but the results spoke for themselves. His legs responded, grew, and became far more balanced with the rest of his physique. When it came to biceps, his signature feature, Beckles focused on total isolation. Cables, concentration curls, slow reps, and hard contractions at the top, often rotating the wrists to intensify the peak. He also shattered a common gym myth. High reps don't equal more definition. For him, ideal hypertrophy happened in the 8 to 12 rep range, with solid weight and full control. Simple, effective, and repeated day after day. Albert's nutrition strategy followed the exact same logic that guided his training: simplicity, consistency, and purpose. His diet was built around lean proteins, vegetables, whole grains, and natural foods, chosen not just for aesthetics, but to sustain performance and long-term health. At one point in his career, Beckles even adopted a vegetarian diet, completely cutting out red meat. Even so, he continued competing at an elite level, relying on sources like eggs, dairy, lentils, and other legumes to meet his nutritional needs. Supplements were part of his routine, but always with one clear rule: protein powders, amino acids, and vitamins were support tools, never the foundation of his diet. Another key principle was his near-total avoidance of ultra-processed foods and refined sugar. Even during the off-season, when many athletes completely let loose, he stayed disciplined. That didn't mean extreme restriction, but awareness and intention. Outside the stage, Albert always made it clear that his strongest foundation was his personal life. Married to Arlene Beckles, He placed immense value on family and believed that no bodybuilding victory meant anything without peace, balance, and stability at home. Even during the most intense years of his career, Beckles never allowed the sport to consume his entire life. He understood that health isn't just physical appearance, it's mental and emotional well-being too. That balance between career, body, and personal life was one of the pillars behind his remarkable longevity. His mindset was consistently marked by positivity, emotional discipline, and gratitude. After retiring from competition, he didn't walk away from bodybuilding. He kept training regularly, maintaining healthy habits and an active lifestyle. For him, retirement wasn't an ending. It was simply a shift in pace. The sport was part of who he was. On top of that, Beckles became a mentor to younger athletes, sharing experience, guidance, and a long-term perspective. He earned respect not just for his titles, but for the wisdom built over decades in the game. Albert Beckles' impact goes far beyond trophies and rankings. In a sport that was long shaped by exclusion and unspoken barriers, he became a symbol of representation, proving that talent, discipline, and excellence have no color, origin, or social label. His presence on stage carried weight beyond aesthetics. For many young athletes, especially those facing prejudice or limited opportunities, Beckles was living proof that reaching the top was possible even when the system didn't seem to be on your side. He didn't just inspire bodybuilders, he inspired anyone fighting against limits imposed by society. In the end, Albert became living proof that consistency beats speed. He showed that it's not about getting there fast, it's about staying in the game when most people quit. If this journey inspired you in any way, hit that like button now. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos about athletes who pushed limits, changed the sport, and left legacies that span generations. Here, every story is told with purpose. And before you go, here's one last invitation. On your screen right now is another video from the channel about a classic bodybuilding legend who also defied time and made history. Click it, keep this journey going with us, and keep the inspiration that drives this sport alive. See you in the next video.